Amazon pours $25 billion into Anthropic to dominate enterprise AI. Moonshot AI open sources a terrifyingly capable new agent swarm, and Apple names a hardcore hardware engineer as its new CEO to navigate the AI era. Welcome to Anuq.com, your daily dose of AI know-how. We need to talk about the massive ceiling the tech industry just slammed into. Within the next 18 months, a piece of headless software might autonomously negotiate your salary increase, while at the exact same time you're stuck on a 6-month waiting list for a basic smartphone. It's the ultimate paradox of this current tech cycle. We have this seemingly infinite self-improving digital intelligence colliding headfirst with the brutally finite realities of physical manufacturing and energy grids. You simply cannot build a limitless cognitive layer on a constrained silicon foundation, and that foundation is cracking. We're looking at a global memory chip shortage extending all the way through 2027. The data center boom requires memory production to scale at 12% annually just to keep up, but the fabrication plants are currently pacing at barely 7.5%. When we're talking about high bandwidth memory and the advanced packaging required to stack these chips, that gap represents millions of silicon wafers and entire generations of enterprise models that simply cannot be deployed. Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron control roughly 90% of this market, and their pipelines are maxed out. You can't just 3D print a $20 billion extreme ultraviolet lithography plant. The lead time to pour the concrete and install those ASML machines is measured in half decades. This macroeconomic shockwave is altering the hardware in your pocket right now. Smartphone average selling prices have hit an all-time global record of $523. The sub-$100 smartphone is functionally dead. The unit economics just don't work anymore. For the last 15 years, the thesis was that mobile tech was the great democratizer. Get a cheap Android device to a teenager in an emerging market, giving them the same access to knowledge as a Wall Street executive. But now, because baseline operating systems require massive local memory overhead just to run background AI telemetry, the entry fee to the digital economy has quintupled overnight. The hardware floor has been permanently raised. When hardware hits a physical wall, the industry invariably tries to engineer a software band-aid. The hyperscalers know they can't conjure memory chips out of thin air, so they're attacking the memory footprint of the models themselves. Google recently rolled out a technique called TurboQuant, claiming to compress the memory footprint of a large language model by a factor of 6 without degrading its reasoning. For the tech enthusiasts out there, quantization essentially means taking the high-precision floating point numbers that make up the neural network's brain and rounding them down to save RAM. Historically, this lobotomizes the model. It loses nuance and starts hallucinating, like compressing a pristine 4K film into a pixelated GIF. But TurboQuant acts like a hyper-precise scalpel. In any neural network, most connections just provide baseline context, while a small handful of critical outlier weights dictate complex logic. TurboQuant dynamically scans the architecture, leaves the vital outlier parameters in high precision, and aggressively crushes the rest. It's an algorithmic sleight of hand that could significantly lower the barrier for running frontier models locally. But a software trick only delays the inevitable. Long-term dominance requires owning the physical infrastructure, and we are seeing a tidal wave of capital flow into proprietary hardware. The Australian startup Scienta just pulled in $26 million to attack AI bottlenecks at the physical chip layer. But that is a drop in the ocean compared to the hyperscalers. Amazon's massive $25 billion commitment to Anthropic brings their total investment to $33 billion. The operational terms are staggering. Anthropic is committed to spending over $100 billion on AWS technologies over the next decade, and Amazon guarantees them 5 gigawatts of compute capacity to train the next generation of Claude models. Let's do the math on 5 gigawatts. A single gigawatt can power 750,000 homes. Amazon is promising the continuous electrical draw of a medium country dedicated solely to matrix multiplication. With power grids in Texas and California teetering on the edge of brownouts, the multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure crisis of the decade is that data centers have outgrown municipal grids. This Amazon Anthropic deal is also a calculated strike against NVIDIA. Amazon is forcing Anthropic to utilize its proprietary Trainium silicon, subsidizing a rival software ecosystem to break NVIDIA's CUDA lock-in. They are building sovereign, localized nation-states of compute, and the capital concentration required is terrifying. Look at Jeff Bezos' new AI lab, Project Prometheus. Fueled by $10 billion in fresh capital from legacy institutional money like JP Morgan and BlackRock, on top of its initial $6.2 billion, it's nearing a $38 billion valuation. The era of the scrappy AI startup building a frontier model out of a garage is permanently over. You need the GDP of a small nation and the energy grid of a metropolis just to enter the arena. Because centralized data centers are hitting power grid limits, the logical escape valve is to push processing power to the edge, directly into local devices. This explains the leadership earthquake at Apple. John Ternus taking over as CEO from Tim Cook on September 1st is a massive signal. Cook was the ultimate global supply chain optimizer, but Ternus is a pure, hardcore hardware engineering leader. He architected the Apple Silicon transition. His elevation means Apple's survival strategy relies on the deep integration of customized hardware and local intelligence. Independent developers and enterprise power users are straight up hoarding high-end Mac Minis and Mac Studios, which are sold out until the fall. Apple Silicon's unified memory, where the CPU and GPU share the same massive pool of RAM, makes these machines uniquely capable of running massive open-source AI models entirely locally. If you're a healthcare startup, you want the intelligence severed from the internet under your desk, not sent via API to a centralized server. Apple realizes it lost the race to build the smartest centralized model, outsourcing the big brain to Google's Gemini for iOS. But their pivot toward ultra-powerful local hardware points to a radical shift, the real-time death of the user interface. We are entering the era of headless software. For 25 years, software-as-a-service companies sold you a beautiful graphical interface to manipulate a database. But headless software assumes humans will no longer click buttons. Graphical interfaces are inefficient for machines. Your personal local AI agent doesn't need a drop-down menu. It needs raw API access. Imagine your home agent detects a massive spike in your Wi-Fi bill. Normally, you'd spend an hour logging into an app, waiting on hold, and arguing with a rep. In the headless world, your local agent detects the spike, autonomously calls the provider's backend, negotiates a promotional rate via API handshake based on competitor pricing, pays it, and texts your earpiece. The time to resolution collapses from an hour to milliseconds. This isn't theoretical. Alipay launched AI Pay in China, hitting 100 million users instantly. They use autonomous agents, nicknamed lobsters, to execute multi-step financial transactions purely through voice authorization. To solve the terrifying security implications, the industry created the OpenClaw standard. Much like the physical chip on your credit card generates a single-use token, OpenClaw is a cryptographic handshake protocol for agents. It verifies identity, sets dynamic spending limits, and provides an audit trail, allowing code to legally act as your financial proxy. When you unleash this inside a Fortune 500 company, it completely rewrites the corporate org chart. OpenAI's rollout of the Hermes platform means they are no longer selling chatbots. They are selling 24/7 autonomous AI workers. Their Chronicle screen memory system is wild. It uses advanced visual telemetry to semantically parse the pixels on a virtual desktop. If a company has a messy 20-year-old proprietary application with no API, the Hermes agent can literally see the screen, move a virtual mouse, and click the buttons exactly like a human intern. You can hand a chief of staff agent a data migration project on Friday, and by Monday it has clicked through 50,000 records. To get this into legacy corporations, OpenAI partnered globally with Cognizant to deploy their Codex model, using human consultants to rip out old pipelines and make AI native software engineering the standard. Anthropic is attacking the exact same layer with Claude Code and Claude Design alongside Opus 4.7. An agentic dashboard built by Claude Code is a live, self-healing orchestration layer. You don't drag and drop fields. You use voice to ask the model to predict inventory shortfalls based on Suez Canal delays. The agent writes the integration code on the fly, connects to global maritime APIs, queries domestic rail endpoints, and spins up a real-time heat map in 10 seconds. Claude Design brings that exact programmatic generation to visual assets, generating interactive 3D floor plans that strictly adhere to brand guidelines without a human ever opening CAD software. Adobe is doing the same with CX Enterprise, and SynthFlow AI is partnering with 8x8 to automate contact centers. But enterprise data schemas are a nightmare of typos and null fields, causing agents to hallucinate and crash. While tech giants sell proprietary walled garden tools to fix this, the open source community is brute forcing the problem with raw parallel cognitive power. Moonshot AI just open sourced the Kimi K2.6 model, and its specifications are monumental. It boasts 12 hours of continuous reasoning. Historically, models suffered from context degradation. They forgot earlier instructions. The compute cost of attention mechanisms scaled quadratically until the system crashed. But open source researchers cracked new optimizations like advanced ring attention. So instead of relying heavily on retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, which is basically an AI constantly having to look up information in an external database, like an index in a book, Kimi K2.6 holds millions of tokens in its active working memory. It loads the whole library into its brain at once. It uses this to coordinate agent swarms, spinning up 300 parallel subagents. For a massive database migration, Agent 1 maps the schema, Agents 2 through 50 migrate tables, and Agents 51 through 100 write load balancing logic simultaneously. By Monday, the architecture is compiled and tested. Startups like Factory AI are hitting billion-dollar valuations just providing desktop environments for these swarms. Alibaba's Qwen 3.6 Max preview is making similar leaps. This velocity is causing absolute panic inside Google and OpenAI. DeepMind has essentially declared a state of emergency. Sergey Brin personally came out of retirement to lead a strike team, tracking usage on their internal jet ski leaderboard. Generating simple code snippets is dead. The new goal is long context reasoning, AI that independently navigates massive code bases to train the next iteration of itself. They are pivoting to high-ticket B2B infrastructure and seeking regulatory moats by graduating to physical, life-or-death decisions. In medicine, an AI model analyzing DNA methylation to trace rare tumors is a prime example. It analyzes 1,000 specific CPG regions. The revolution isn't just accuracy, it's explainable biology. The AI doesn't just output a statistical probability. It isolates the precise cellular origin of a failure, identifies the misfolded protein, and provides exact biological literature citations. It acts as a hyper-advanced, verifiable sensory organ for doctors. In the legal sector, Thomson Reuters rolled out their AI for Justice program. With 92% of civil legal needs for low-income Americans unmet, this AI reduces intake processing time by 50%. It triages massive backlogs of disability claims over a weekend, pinpointing missing medical codes. And DeepMind integrating Gemini with Boston Dynamics hardware is the birth of embodied AI. Jeff Bezos' Project Prometheus wants to give drones autonomous physical reasoning. A drone in a nuclear facility doesn't need a human remote operator. It physically interprets analog pressure dials, analyzes microscopic rust, and instantly calculates structural integrity. But the single biggest roadblock across all this is the verification crisis. A Bloomberg poll in London showed 50% of finance leaders are actively blocking AI adoption because of numerical hallucinations. Only 9% cared about sophisticated language. Enterprise buyers do not want a creative accountant. They want deterministically accurate, interrogatable systems. If an AI denies a mortgage, a compliance officer must trace that logic back to a hard, verified source. Anthropic is capturing this market by rolling out its Mythos system to European banks facing strict compliance laws. To achieve military-grade reliability, the industry relies on multi-model architectures. Microsoft's Azure autocorrect layer splits the cognition. The primary massive model generates complex reasoning, but before outputting it, it routes through a secondary police model. This rigid, quantized police model cross-references the output against a hard-coded knowledge graph, catching fake judicial precedents and forcing recalculations before the human sees it. And we have to verify the training data input itself. The Ethical AI Coalition, including the IEEE and Hugging Face, is pushing for a transparency score, a nutritional label detailing whether weights were trained on copyrighted or poisoned data. Verification even extends to human identity. Tinder and the Sam Altman-backed World are rolling out iris-scanning hardware to verify biological humans. Deepfakes have won the arms race against detection algorithms. If a fully autonomous deepfake perfectly impersonates a trusted vendor's voice and micro-expressions to authorize a shadow-budget wire transfer, the capital simply vanishes. Cryptographic proof of biology tied to a digital wallet is becoming mandatory for corporate survival. The major labs are aggressively adopting these standards, not out of ethics, but as a calculated moat to legally lock out rogue open-source swarms from the Fortune 500. Before we get into the final takeaways, just a reminder that you can find more insights like this to future-proof your career at inuku.com. When you zoom out and synthesize the macro picture, the multi-billion-dollar capital expenditure on Trainium chips, open-source agent swarms refactoring mainframes, explainable AI in medicine, the overarching narrative is unbridled Wall Street optimism. The expectation of massive productivity gains is the undisputed driver of the global financial market. We are firmly in the heavy machinery infrastructure phase of a new technological epoch. But as we invite these headless autonomous agents to manage our corporate networks and personal finances, a profound philosophical shift is occurring. User retention data shows Anthropic is dominating ChatGPT by a 2-to-1 margin among heavy power users. When surveyed, these developers aren't choosing Claude because it writes marginally cleaner Python. They are consciously choosing it because of its ethical alignment, its transparent safety approach, and its behavioral philosophy. We are rapidly transitioning into an era where tool choice fundamentally becomes identity. When you choose an autonomous AI agent to run your life or build your startup, you are no longer picking software from a feature list. You are adopting a digital philosophy. You are choosing the worldview mathematically encoded into that model's weights. When you hand over the cryptographic keys to your digital life, whose philosophy are you actually installing? And that's your daily dose of AI know-how from inuku.com, AI news you can use.